Good day, everyone. This is Pastor Theo. I'm actually on location. My wife and I, we're getting ready to go off the grid for a few days to just relax and get some sunshine. But I wanted to make sure I shot this video to keep things going as we are on this journey during Lent. Last week, we looked at Matthew chapter 4, just looked at one verse again. Jesus being tempted. We looked at him being led into the wilderness. We looked at the fact that he was hungry. The week before, all these last 2 weeks, we've been looking at just verse 1 and verse 2. This week, we're going to look at a lot more verses to break things down. But before we get into Matthew, I want to just read a brief passage that is very relevant to what we're going to be discussing today. And this is found in the book of 1 John chapter 2, starting in verse 15. 1 John chapter 2, starting in verse 15. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, and it lists off three things: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. So it talks about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And that's going to be important as we continue on in Matthew, as we see Jesus being tempted by the devil. So we're going to pick back up in Matthew chapter 4. I'm just going to read all the verses. I'm starting in verse 1 until where we want to get to. And it says, Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterwards he was hungry. And the fact that he was hungry, that is going to be an opportunity for the devil to try to test Jesus. When we are hungry, when we are thirsty, when we are tired, and I'm talking whether we're talking about physical or spiritually speaking or emotionally speaking, those are times where the enemy can test us. And it says, now when the tempter came to him, he, being the tempter, said, if you are the Son of God, command these stones become bread. So right there, we're going to see this phrase a couple of times. If you are the Son of God, this is where we see that pride of life. Pride of life, what we just read in 1 John 2, is whenever we take pride in ourselves, whenever we rely upon ourselves and not on God. Now, keep in mind, Jesus is God. He is God the Son, yet he was sent by God the Father. And so he came to do his Father's will, and it is important that he does so. And so it is important that he always follows the will of God. And so when Satan tries to test him and says, if you are the Son of God, he is trying to get him to not rely upon the Father. He is trying to get him to rely upon himself. And that is a temptation that we all face when we start to feel ourselves more than we ought to, or when the world or Satan or our very own flesh tempts us by saying, since you are all that, you can do it. You use you can use what you have to get this thing done. Jesus, you can use the power that you have to turn these stones into bread. And then you, not God the Father, but you yourself can get you out of this current situation, which was him being hungry. You can take care of your hunger right now. And how many of us have ever hungered? How many of us have ever thirsted? How many of us have ever craved something? And then the temptation is to just to get it, not to wait upon the Lord, not to do it in God's way or God's timing, not to trust him, but to say, hey, I can take care of this myself. That's the pride of life. And it also deals with the lust of the flesh. Jesus was hungry. He had cravings. And Satan tries to be opportunistic to say, since you're already hungry, let me see if I can get you to get outside of yourself and to do something that you should not be doing, which is going against the Father's will, because he was setting himself apart for a reason, to be tested, to be prepared for public ministry. And he's not going to short circuit that by feeding himself. He's going to continue to do what he had been doing for those 40 days and 40 nights, which was trust the Father, trust the process. And so it's important that we don't prematurely abandon that which God has for us because we are hungry or thirsty or have cravings, and then we're opportunistic to say, let me feed this flesh. Let us resist that temptation. And it goes on to say that Jesus answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And I'm going to talk more about that next video. Then the devil took him up into the holy city, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, once again, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge over you. Once again, if you are the Son of God, if you are who you claim to be, which means that you have some power, why don't you exercise that power right now? Throw yourself over. The angels, after all, will come and rescue you. That's what it says in the Word of God. And so, once again, he is tapping into, at least attempting to tap into, that pride of life. Hey, if you're all that, if you are who you say you are, do this and do that. And how many times do we get outside of ourselves when we fall into that temptation, when we do things because outside or external voices are tempting us to do those things, but it causes us to be disobedient. It causes us not to trust. So it's important that we obey. It's important that we trust God. It's important that we do not rely upon our own selves, but that we trust him. And that means denying ourselves. It may even mean denying the things that we have every right to, denying who we are, because Christ could have done that. He did have the power. He did have the authority. Yet, once again, not his will be done. He denied himself in order to have the Father's will be done. Lust of the flesh, pride of life. He resisted those temptations. And then we read once again, he shall give his angels charge over you. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, it is written again, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. In other words, you should not test God. Hey, God, um, let me see if you're real. Let me see if you're going to keep your promises, and I'm going to do this thing to test you to see if it's real. There is going to be plenty of opportunities for God to reveal himself, to prove himself, to show himself. We should not test him, especially when we're doing it in a way that it would be a sign of us following after the flesh. It'd be a sign of us not trusting, not obeying, because if we truly do trust, because here's the thing, to say God, if you're really God, aka let me test you. Well, another way to test God is to trust him. If we truly do believe that he is who he says he is, we don't have to question it. Then we can demonstrate it by trusting him. That's what we should be doing. And that's what Christ did. He did not test God. Instead, he trusted God. Again, the devil took him up on an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. Once again, appealing to lust of the eyes. Let me show you something. And he said to him, all these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Hey, you see this? You like it, don't you? You want it, don't you? You know you could have it, but here's the catch. Bow down and worship me. And here's the thing. God has it all anyway. And he's going to get it all when he resurrects from the grave with all authority under heaven and earth, all power in his hands. So the Father has already promised this to the Son. Yet there is a proper process and protocol by which the Son will achieve this, and this is coming down, humbling himself, putting on flesh, living a righteous life. I'm talking about not destroying the law, but fulfilling the law, keeping the law perfectly, then being crucified, then being buried, and then resurrecting with all power. And it's by that process that he will gain all things. It's not by short circuiting or sidetracking or shirking responsibility or fast tracking or looking for the shortcut. The flesh, the enemy, the world, ourselves, we're always being tempted to take the shortcut, the easy route. All these things you can have it, and all you have to do is worship Satan. Fast money, all the women and all the men, all the riches, all the power. But there's always a cost. Worshiping others other than God. Worshiping Satan himself, worshiping mammon or money, worshiping our sex, power, worshiping our philosophies and our ideologies, our political parties, our country, ourselves, worshiping any other thing other than God. And all of those things has promises of riches and power and get quick schemes and instant gratification. But none of those things satisfy. And all of those things would lead us to disobeying God and doing things in the right way. And it hasn't changed. We're still being tempted in the same ways: lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. So as we seek to set ourselves apart during this Lenten season, and we are led by the Spirit into the wilderness, and we fast, as we consecrate and set ourselves apart, as we disconnect, we will grow weary, thirsty, hungry. We'll go through withdrawals because of what we're so used to having. And it's in those opportune times when the flesh, when the world, when Satan uses others, Satan himself, whoever it may be, will try to test us in a way that there is an offering, a deal, um, something that an offer we can't refuse, something that seems so perfect. You mean I can have all of this? You mean I can have that fancy thing over this and this dream thing over this and this thing that I've always hoped for? I can have all of those things, and all I have to do is cut some corners. all I have to do is not follow God. All I have to do is bow down and worship another. Let us not succumb to those temptations. Even in the midst of our hunger, let us prefer something better. Because remember, we're talking about fasting, turning down that which is good for something better. That's our hope. That's our prayer. Once again, this has been Dr. Theo, aka Pastor Theo, aka Professor Theo, aka Jess Theo, with another mini midweek meal. Take care and God bless.